call roll or?
I can do it.
Okay,
She's working on some door tags in the background. She's pulling
Ah.
double. It's been a day of doing double duty today, so she's doing that in the background. So
Multitasking.
Chair O'Connell,
I am present.
Vice Chair Quantz, Board Member Majewski,
Present.
Board Member Marshall, Board Member Lair,
Here.
Board Member Milton,
Present.
and Board Member Picorni. And both wills did reach out ahead of time. They notified us that they were going to be absent, so it's not surprising to see them not on the call. I'll reach out to Board Member Marshall to see if he's going to join us. Perhaps he's having some issues getting in.
Yeah, no, that'd be great, Jason. If you could, since we don't have a conflict at the end, why don't we stay with the standard agenda, unless you've made arrangements otherwise for some of the staff to be here sooner rather than later.
If we could, I would recommend that we move the water discussion up to the first item of business, since we did have our team come in to talk with that item first.
All right. Well, let's at least stay with the normal process. Are there any public appearances? Have we noticed of anyone needing to speak to the board?
No appearances.
Take a motion to approve the minutes of the September 12 meeting.
I'll move.
Moved by Member Lair, seconded by Member Milton. Any comments or discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Good, passes. All right. At the request of staff, I'm going to exercise chair's prerogative and rearrange the agenda slightly. And our first order of business will be to take up the water rate and bond issuance. Jason, who's going to take point on that?
That will be me. So good to see you again, Utility Board. My name is Ben Schumacher, financial analyst here with the city. So I'll go ahead and share my screen. Now you all see a PowerPoint. That is the wrong screen.
We can see it.
Oh, can you see it?
Yeah, well, we did. Now you've taken it down. Right?
Okay, let me do this.
There you go. I can see that.
Okay, perfect. That should look good. All right. So again, name's Ben Schumacher. I'm a financial analyst here with the City of Mercer Island. Tonight we will be covering the water and sewer utility rate updates. So we'll go over water first, and then we'll have time to talk about that, and then we'll proceed to sewer. I am also joined tonight by Justin Monway, who's the Senior Vice President of Public Finance Investment Banking for Piper Sandler & Co. He'll join me for the water debt issuance overview and provide some additional information there. I'll introduce him when we get to that portion of the presentation. I'll run you through about 11 slides tonight, and we'll jump into it. So just our agenda, we'll touch on the rate update schedule for the mid-biennial process, what the board has to look forward to still for the rest of the year. Then we'll head straight into water. We'll have time for questions and discussion afterwards, head straight into sewer, and then there will be more time for questions at the end. So our rate update schedule, right now we're on the October 10th meeting. We've already met about EMS and stormwater utility and had our rate discussion there. We'll go over water and sewer tonight. And then the last order of business will be to take these rate recommendations in front of City Council on the November 21st meeting. Staff will again invite Chair O'Connell to come speak about the rate recommendations and kind of the thinking behind that, as he has done in years prior.
Is on my calendar, and I am anticipating doing so.
Perfect. Just before we dive into each individual utility, so these are the financial policies that were in front of you last year as part of the rate update process as well. It's a lot of information on the slide. The few things that we'll just kind of draw attention to is just this operating reserve, capital reserve, and then the capital funding decisions. So those three lines are really kind of the driving force behind our rate recommendations for water and sewer specifically this time around. For our operating reserves, water is a 90 days minimum operating and maintenance reserve, sewer is 30. And then for our capital reserve, both are at 1% of our total capital assets. That's significant in these funds just because the infrastructure is so much greater than something, say, like the stormwater utility. And then for capital funding decisions, so this is really where we got into the meat of deciding on what projects to kind of seek outside or additional outside funding for, beyond just rate reinvestment. This was really this is really pertinent to the water fund this time around, as the cost of our capital program to replace the aging infrastructure on the island really does require that the city goes out for additional funding. And so we'll dive into that. Our guidelines for that are to cash fund projects under 2.5 million, and then to seek alternative funding for projects over that 2.5 million mark, as well as having these projects be able to be spent and reimbursed in that debt eligibility window after an issuance occurs. So into the water update. So the primary drivers behind our rate recommendation this year are going to be our operating costs. I think we've spoke to it before, but again, we're just seeing really high rates of inflation and cost of living adjustments, specifically with our CPIW of the Seattle-Tacoma Bellevue area. That's the measurement the city uses to base its COLA adjustments or cost of living adjustments for staff represented for different bargaining groups throughout the city. That was 6% last year or for 2023, and it's estimated to be at 6% again. It's actually 6.5, but there's a cap in represented staffs for the APSME that caps it at 6%. And it's usually non-rep staff follow that percentage. Our fiscal policies, again, are driving this that we touched on earlier. And then this time around, capital program costs were the really big escalator behind the water rate recommendation. So just some quick points to it. We have a very robust capital program in water with an escalated or more than 51.7 million in escalated capital costs from 2023 to 2028. That's the 6-year kind of window that we plan in for our capital program, as well as our rate studies. And that was determined to not be able to be covered on a cash basis alone, just because of the robust size of this capital program. So what this means is that the city, in the near terms, the city is seeking $19.3 million of outside funding in 2024. 3.3 million of that is a Public Works Trust Fund bond, which has been approved, if I'm not mistaken, but we still need to seek reimbursement for that project on expenses related to that project. And then the remaining 16 million will be limited tax general obligation bonds. And that will be what Justin will go ahead and touch on in the next few slides. So I will go ahead and pass it off to Justin.
Thanks, Ben. So good evening, everyone. My name is Justin Monway with Piper Sandler, and I'm the municipal advisor for the city of Mercer Island. Our firm has worked with the city since 2001, and I personally have worked with the city since 2004. And the last time the city issued bonds was in 2017. And I know Lawan Tuttle was part of that, the financing team for that issue, as well as several other issues. And I know I'll be working primarily with Matt Mornick and Lawan, as well as I'm sure a few others from the city when we get this process started. So what you see here is the preliminary schedule of events. There's a lot more steps actually than what's shown here, but this is an abbreviated version. It's about a 3-month process, so the plan is to start kicking off the process in March with the goal of selling the bonds in June. And so why are we aiming for June? Well, generally speaking, the best time to issue bonds is early in the year when there's less issuers selling bonds and there's more demand from investors. June can also be a good time to sell bonds because June is a popular redemption month, meaning that's when issuers pay off or refinance the balance of their bond issue. So investors are looking to reinvest in new bonds at that time. So what you'll see is several documents that are going to be distributed and reviewed over the course of the schedule. That includes the bond ordinance and the preliminary official statement, or the POS, and also a draft rating presentation. The bond ordinance is the legal document where the city authorizes the issuance of the bonds. It also defines the rights of the city and the bondholders. The preliminary official statement is the prospectus that goes out to banks that will bid on the bond, as well as investors. And then you also have the rating presentation. Whenever you go out for public sale bonds, you're going to need to obtain a rating. And so there's going to need to be a rating presentation. And the city currently has a AAA rating from Moody's, which is the highest rating possible. That's anchored by the city's strong wealth levels, balanced financials, and healthy reserves. And so that's what the rating presentation is. So on May 7th, we're scheduled to have the bond ordinance approved by the city council, and then we'll sell the bonds early June. That date can be flexible just in case if maybe market conditions aren't ideal, we can always push that date out to another day when there are better market conditions. Generally 2 weeks after the sale date is when the bond closing is, and then that's when the city will receive its bond proceeds. That's a general overview of the schedule and the steps to a bond issuance. Any questions about that? Okay.
Any other members of the board? Any questions?
Mm-mm.
Not hearing any, Justin. Thank you.
Okay. And then I was just asked to cover just the interest rate, just go over the interest rate history. This graph here is the AAA MMD or municipal market data. This is the benchmark of interest rates the bonds trade off of. So the better the credit rating, the narrower that spread is off of that MMD index. This graph here represents the 20-year benchmark rate. So what this shows is the current 20-year benchmark rate is 415, and the average of the last 20 years is 324. So we hit all-time interest rate lows in 2020 and 2021, but with the Fed trying to control rising inflation by hiking rates, we've seen a spike in rates since the beginning of last year. So although inflation is more under control than it was, we continue to see a strong labor market and rising oil prices. So these are all signs that inflation is still an issue. The Fed did meet on September 20th, and their message was that they would keep rates high as long as necessary to curb inflation. So the thought was that there was a good chance of another rate hike this year, and there may only be a 50 basis point cut in 2024. So rates may be actually higher for longer than what was anticipated earlier this year. But this graph was made over a week ago. Things actually took a turn today with the geopolitical events occurring in Israel. When bad things were happening in the world and the economy, there was a flight to quality with investors looking to invest in bonds, which are considered a safe investment. So there was a recent surge in market rates after the September Fed meeting, but with the news today and the expectation that maybe the Fed may be done raising rates, with this news, rates actually fell by 9 basis points today. So we'll see how that goes. Was there a question? No? Okay. So I was just wrap this up by saying every day can be different with all the volatility. But over the last 50 years, when the Fed is done with the rate hike cycle, interest rates typically fall. And so we'll see if that pattern holds true when the city goes up to the bond market next spring. If rates do fall, I wouldn't expect it to be where we were in 2020 and 2021, but hopefully we'll be closer to that average line.
Awesome. Thank you, Justin. So with all that in mind, the staff's recommendation for rate increase for 2024 is an 8% increase over 2023 rates for the water utility. This for an average single family bill, this represents about a 5.27 or a $5.27 increase over existing rates. And then you can see the bi-monthly breakdown underneath as well. And this, I will say, this just fits in line with our smooth rate proposal as part of our rate models. We have 8% for from 2023 through 2028. And this is where staff expects it to land. So go ahead and stop sharing my screen and we can start our discussion.
Questions or comments for Ben or Justin?
Yeah, I had a question, Tim.
Meredith, you first.
Yeah. Ben, I was curious on the operating expenses with the salaries and benefits. Last year, there was a comment that there was an expected retirement. And I'm curious, I'm not trying to ask personal information about any particular employees, but did that expected retirement happen, or is it not going to happen and it didn't happen this year? And so, or is it expected in the following year?
I'll pass that question to Jason.
I can talk to it. Yeah, so retirement is still anticipated for this year. The individual had some pretty significant capital work that was underway that they were looking to conclude. And so that work is coming, in particular, the booster chlorination station, which we've talked about a number of times here, that work is finishing up now, and we anticipate the individual moving on to greener pastures later this fall. So it's still scheduled. We were working with the individual to try and get some of this work done rather than passing to a new project manager, and it's been helpful for both sides. So it's still gonna happen just a little later because of the project timing.
So will that impact the salary and benefits forecast at all? Because I see it continuing to go up in 23 and 24.
So we've actually done a hire ahead. A lot of times for a lot of our long-term employees, that institutional knowledge gets lost when we transfer from old employees to new employees. And so we actually went to the council and sought council authorization to hire ahead this individual so that we can transfer some of that institutional knowledge
Right, makes
to
sense.
our new employee. And so we've actually hired our new employee. They're on staff now and working with the individual to get that institutional knowledge transferred.
And was that not
So, no.
included in last year's budget, the plan to hire ahead for the retirement?
I don't believe so. I believe it was a specific individual request we went back to the council with independently of the budget process.
Okay. Okay, thanks.
Dave,
Yeah, so I had one of the questions was on the capital fund balance on the water utility. Looked like it was still sitting pretty high at the end of the 2027, 2028, kind of the projected budget years. I was just curious, the target it said was around $1 million, and it was around like 4 million in the budget at that point. So the question was, I guess, is that still that there's like a lot of project work that's expected to get paid for in like 2029, 2030, it's still riding high at that point? Or I'm just curious what that was.
Yeah, that would be my expectation for why that would be a little bit riding high. I will say the out years are typically kind of the planning years for our rate modeling and our CIP process. So really when you get towards 27, 28, the fund balance changes so much in the 4 years before that, that those numbers are very, very much for planning stages. So they're likely to change.
Okay. And then I had a second question if anyone else wanted to go.
I have a question, Steve, but you go right ahead.
There was also a section that talked about, I think it was on page 5, mentioned that there was a notable increase in the AC water main ruptures relative to prior years. I think I'd sent an email into the group. I wasn't sure if you had a chance to pull anything on that, Jason, or if I can, you want to deal with that later.
So we have been working frantically to try and pull this information. It's been a bit of a busy day, so my apologies. Normally we would be able to pull it pretty quickly, but just with everything going on, we haven't had. Elaine has some information behind it. We have our total number of main breaks. We're trying to sort it out by type right now. So perhaps give us half an hour and I can come back and circle back with that because she's doing it literally right now behind the scenes. But I will say we have seen a noticeable increase in main breaks, in particular the AC pipe. So the board may recall that we average anywhere from 10 to 15 main breaks per year, which is pretty high compared to other utilities. Usually our main breaks happen in this time of year. And it's fall, winter, spring, where the seasonal changes, the soil conditions are changing. You have some soil movement. That's what causes, the freeze thaw. That's what causes challenges with our main breaks. On the AC pipe in particular, of late, we're seeing it happen in the middle of summer. So outside of the normal cycle, we've had 2 on literally a section of pipe that's within this last 6 months, within like feet of each other. And what we're seeing is that what used to happen on the AC pipe is the saddle used to fail on this AC pipe where the saddle is where you connect into the main pipe to provide service to the customer. What we're seeing now is that the pipe is literally disintegrating in the ground. Like we're talking catastrophic failure of the pipe. And so the time of year it's happening in the middle of summer where the ground is really hard and stable. It's not shifting. It's literally the age of the pipe that's just crumbling. So Lane's working on the specific data point, but we have seen an uptick. In fact, just this last summer, the project that we had set aside for the first of the AC pipe projects. We're actually moving up into our work plan to get it done sooner because of just the urgency necessary to get this work done. So we'll get to the data point here shortly, hopefully. But there's some context for that discussion as well. Hopefully it helps.
Yes, no, I appreciate that. The main thing was trying to understand kind of the scale of what the change you were noticing. So yeah, that's interesting. Thank you.
So Meredith, I see you, but we're going to take turns, and unless
Go for it.
Steven's got a question, I'll go ahead and go next.
Yep.
And I think, Ben, this is for you, and I'm really just trying to juxtapose two things. There's a statement in here, good financial position enables us to kick the debt issuance off till next year. And then I also look at the fact that the operating ending balance is gone up to 209 days this year, 218 days next year. When I thought you said the financial goal is 90 days. So can you put that side by side for why we need to adjust our previous smoothed expectation of, what was it, 5%? Why we need to do that this year rather than next?
Yeah, I can speak to that. So the idea is that these smooth rates are set over a 6-year period to ensure the kind of health of the water utility for the entire 6-year period. On a year-to-year basis, it may look like fund balance will go up in 1 year. And really that is part of a byproduct of the biennial budget that the city runs on. And so when a budget is approved, it's for 2 years at a time. And really staff has budget authority throughout both years to spend that budget down. So in 2023, if fund balance is high, it's not because those funds aren't positioned well to be spent or going to be spent. It's really that either the work is not happening as fast as initially anticipated, but they are authorized and ready to spend that in the second year of the biennial budget. I will say that it's a new kind of realization that the staff came to in the last few months that we would have a cash balance healthy enough to end this year, 2023, in the water utility to cover all operating expenditures and capital expenditures and hit all of our fiscal policies. And so that's why the debt issuance was really pushed off a year. It's not that those funds weren't needed, is that it was part of it is due to these kind of continuing issues of supply chain delays that we see with some of our projects. Most of those aren't the debt kind of identified for the ideal debt funded projects. Those are all approved and within a timeline of being able to be reimbursed. This idea of shovel ready, I think you'll hear staff say these projects that are well positioned to be funded and spent within the 3 to 4 year timeframe.
I get you. The future is always murky. I do get that. Mm-hmm. My question is, if we're in the sound financial position that we are this year, why do we need an 8% increase this year as opposed to the 5.25% that we had been anticipating?
So I think that 5.25% was based on the prior biennial budget, because we did approve an 8% for 2023. That was our most recent rate increase. And that was really the start of our 23-24 biennial budget. I will say, I think that difference between the 5 and 8% is really what is that kind of the question why it's.
Yes, that's the question.
Okay, perfect. So that difference really reflects the capital program as it was re-evaluated during the 23-24 biennial budget process. And so 23 to 28 is the 6-year period that we did our CIP for. As our capital program was created at the end of 2022 for that time period, it was identified that failing infrastructure of the city's water utility and just the aging infrastructure in general was more critical than at first anticipated. That's what really caused or prompted that 3% to 2.5% to 3% bump that we saw. And that's where that 8% is coming from the 5%. So not only is the 8% is really there to enable the water utility to cover all costs anticipated for the aging infrastructure of the city into the out years, as well as cover our initial immediate costs for our operating and fiscal policies. I'll pass it to Matt. I think he'll add a little bit more.
Thank you, Ben. Okay, Chair O'Connell, just to add to Ben's point, the statement in the memo that the city has a sound financial position is in regards to how we would be evaluated for our credit rating. But in terms of the rate, to put it very simply, the 8% rate increase allows us to hit all of our fiscal policies while simultaneously meeting these large funding expectations that are coming at the same time with the project. So with the project slated in the capital program. If we weren't to go with a 5% rate, we would have to take out more money via a bond issuance, which we're really not positioned to do because the projects don't call for it, or we would have to forgo meeting our funding policy targets. So that's what essentially is at play.
Or another alternative I'll just add is you pull back on your capital program. You pull back on the capital work that you have planned.
Or you spread it across the next years, right? Because you're hitting the 90-day mark if for 2025. If you reduce the increase now, you won't have the reserve built up to hit 90 days in that 2025. You'd have to have a higher percentage increase in the out years. So it would just shift it forward. It's just that this is that 8% thing where they're trying to make a forward motion that's the same over the several years, right? If you decrease it to the 5.25, you'll still have to make up that 3.25 in the out years in order to hit those 90-day marks from 2025 forward.
Precisely. And if Ben did some analysis on the back end to just get a sense of what the rate increase would have to be if we weren't unable to go out for a bond issuance. Ben, do you have that at hand for the water utility?
It's not an exact number, but it is somewhere around a 20% rate increase if we don't go for capital in the first year. And then that would have to be the 8% that we kind of projected out for the 2025 and beyond would have to be increased as well. That 20% doesn't allow us to hit our capital reserve funding target. So we would be missing out on a fiscal policy, would fail to hit that fiscal policy. And so it would also have to be increased. I don't have that analysis ready, but for the immediate year, it is looking north of a 20% rate increase without the debt funding.
Yeah, I mean, you don't need to go there. I get relatively few calls and I'm happy that way. Not sure that would be the case if we told them we're raising the rates 20% year over year.
Yeah.
Meredith, you had your hand patiently raised.
It's okay. I have just another small question. It's in the operating expenditures little graph. This might be a Jason question. I was curious, the water purchase for resale was up 10% from 22-23. And I was curious, did we just happen to use a lot less water last year? And so now it's a huge increase, or what the cause of that increase was?
Ben, this is our SPU codes, correct?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So this is our purchase for SPU. This is on the expenditure side. So we are purchasing more water from SPU. I will say we've talked about our meter replacement program. So when we are purchasing water from SPU, that comes into our system and then it gets sent out through our meter system. And then those costs are paid for by the individual meters. With meters that are more than 15 years in age, your efficiency, the meters don't read as efficiently as they should. And so there is a higher unaccounted water loss number. So in other words, we're purchasing more water from SPU than we're actually charging out to our customers. There's a loss there. With our new meter program coming in place starting next year, we anticipate that those numbers will be tightened up pretty significantly. But nonetheless, we have not replaced those meters yet, and our purchasing costs with SPU have increased because of the water consumption.
And so I'm not clear what this 10% means then. It says 10.2%. I'm on the table 1. And so is that an
So that's an
at
increase in our expenditure. That's an increase of our purchase. That's the increase in our purchasing with our SPU contract for the SPU water that's coming to the island. So again, that's going to come into our system, and then ideally, in the perfect world, it gets allocated back out to our customers, and the customers pay for the accounted water. But we have a higher level of, we've been over a 10% unaccounted water loss number for the last 3 years, for the last 2 reporting cycles. So we've had a higher level of unaccounted water loss. So purchases are higher with SPU than we're receiving our revenue side on the city's portion of it.
Okay. Okay, I think that answers my question.
Any other questions about the recommendation?
There one last one that Ben, you mentioned as you were going through discussing on the staff costs, or the staff salary increases, and that the COLA increases would have been higher because the CPIW you were tracking was whatever 7.5%, something like that, but then it capped at 6 based on the represented contract. And then you mentioned that the non-represented staff use the same amount, that have basically are increased or budgeted for increase at the same amount as the represented staff. Is that correct?
So typically, it's city policy that it's specifically with our AFSCME contract, and most of the operating costs are, or most of the employees in our represented in our operating costs for the water utility are covered under the AFSCME contract or represented by the AFSCME contract.
Gotcha.
And it's just been historical city policy for. Jason might be able to give a time frame, but it's been for as long as I've been with the city. It's just typical city policy that the non-represented staff do usually follow at the represented staff COLA increase. The city is not tied to do that. We are not forced to do that. It's just been a historical kind of fair practice policy. But there is, so the 6%, so the CPIW for 2023 metric that we use to project our next year was 6.5%, but there is a 6% cap in the current AFSCME contract. So that's kind of limiting some expenditures on that side.
Yeah, I just never heard before the concept of that the represented and non-represented were then basically defaulting to the represented rates. So I thought that was interesting.
Sound labor relations.
Fair, yeah, certainly it can head off problems down the road, but it isn't.
Right.
Also ends up being contractually a potential savings. So,
Councilmember Jacobson,
you're on mute.
you're muted.
Here we go. Question probably for Jason, and that is, when are we estimating that the new meters will be 100% online, and therefore we'll be recovering 100 cents on each water dollar?
Next year, unfortunately next year. So a couple things have impacted that project in particular. One is just I'll call it the smart component of the meters that has a material delay, and so that's delayed getting the meters necessary to put in the ground. And then we also we're in our final stages of permitting for this project, which we're going to talk about here at the end of the night. I'll just let you know that there was perhaps an unexpected twist or turn to our permitting requirements regarding the antennas that have to be installed for this project. And I won't get into the details on why or how or what, but the bottom line is we have to do it. And so we're following that process. And so it's fine. And it's not ideal, but it's fine given the delay with getting the meters here anyway. So we'll go through that process. But next year, that's the short answer. Next year, we anticipate having those meters in the ground and recovering those full costs. So the work is still underway right now. We still have crews out there doing meter prep and doing stuff like that, getting ready for construction, but the actual meters will go in the ground probably spring of next year.
So it's reasonable to assume that by June 30 or September 30, or when, and can we tie it down to a quarter? Because I know the public's going to be quite a bit interested in that, particularly an 8% increase
Yeah, Elaine
under-
just popped on the screen and we actually put a quarter in the last report. I don't remember what it was so off the top of my head. Do you remember what it was?
I'm actually guessing that it was Q3 that we talked about. So our current schedule for full deployment of the meters is anticipated. We're supposed to be done by the end of July. And so that's assuming we actually get all the smart points in and stay on schedule. It's been real hit or miss with those deliveries, but right now we're aiming for, so not just the deployment of the new replacement meters, but also the customer portal. So making sure that the whole system is working together. We're shooting for the end of Q3. Which was actually the original schedule for this. We just anticipated that the meters would be going in over a longer period of time. So this is just a much more compressed time for installation of those new meters.
Follow-up question, do we install meters or does a contractor install them?
Contractor installs meters. We have hired 2 contract employees right now that are working on the meter box prep and sort of the work ahead work that's taking place right now. They're contract employees, but the actual install is being done by a contractor.
Thank you.
Any other questions regarding the water utility? I'd open it up for discussion. Does anyone want to make a motion? I'm kind of.
That's fine. Yeah, so we'll move to, I guess, to recommend approval of the staff 8% blended or normalized increase.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
Moved by Member Milton, seconded by Member Lair. Discussion. You, and I'll open it up to you. You're the only one not involved in making the motion. Any comments, questions? It is a big increase, but it is appropriate. So hearing no further discussion, I'll call for the question. All those in favor of recommending to the City Council that the staff's recommendation of an 8% increase be approved. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Passes unanimously. Right. Next item on the agenda is the comparable discussion for the sewer utility. Ben, is that also you in the first instance?
Yeah, that would be the same PowerPoint actually. Go ahead and reshare that. Let me know when you can see that.
Yep.
Okay, perfect. Okay, so diving right into it. So on to sewer utility. So those primary drivers for sewer are similar to what water faces. Again, it's those fiscal policies. So for sewer, it's a 30-day operating and maintenance reserve that we aim for, that 1% capital asset reserve, as well as that same kind of idea for seeking outside funding, which doesn't affect the sewer fund in this biennium, so in 2023 or 2024, but it is on the planning for 2025 and beyond. So we'll touch on that on this slide, and just give the utility board a reminder about what they might be able to expect. But I've lost the slides. Okay. So those fiscal policies, again, our primary drivers are operating costs. It's a similar operating cost of that COLA that come into water. A lot of the staff that are represented in the sewer utility expenses or expenditures are represented by that ASME contract. So it is that 6% cap, even though the CPI-W metric that we follow is 6.5. For our capital program costs, the sewer fund is well equipped to cover 2023 and 2024 while meeting all of our fiscal policy goals. It's in the out years that we're starting to identify a need for outside funding. So currently that looks, currently in our rate modeling, that's a 3.7% or 3.7 million issuance in 2025, and then a smaller issuance in 2027 as well. Most of this is related to work around the Lakeline sewer projects in the future, as those are pretty extensive and tend to be costly projects. And so they are well equipped for us to seek outside funding for. And that's not something that affects this rate recommendation. In a way it does, because we use a smooth rate recommend or a smooth percentage year over year, but it is not immediately impacting a utility like it is the water. So with that brief overview, staff is recommending that we adhere to the 4.5% increase from 2023 rates. This is in line with our smooth rate model, or smooth percentage increase in our rate model. What this looks like in a dollar impact is about $4.47 every month. And then you can see the bi-monthly breakdown on the left as well. We'll go ahead and stop sharing and open up for discussion.
Questions for Ben or other members of staff? Steve?
Just if you could go back to that last slide, I think that was a little different than the one that was in the memo, in that it had showed the breakout of the whatever, I guess, normal revenue versus the pass-through revenue. I just wanted to see the both components together again, because that was actually my question on the other one, was did it include the treatment piece, but it looks like it did not. So the net increase for including both components was okay.
Yeah.
So
on this bottom row is the net impact.
Averaged monthly impact, but it is actually invoiced every 2 months. The one on the left is the one that people will see on their invoices. As
Just
far
notice this also says bi-monthly on the table to the right. That is the monthly. That is not bi-monthly at all.
Got it.
Apologies for that error.
Okay, so blended of around 5%. Okay, yep, thank you. That was my only other question.
Meredith?
Yeah, I'm back on the operating budget again, and I was noticing this very large increase this year on salary and benefits for the sewer utility. Are the people roughly the same who are working on water and who are working on sewer, and then they're just allocated according to some, I don't know, hours or something like that? I mean, I'm surprised at that 19% increase on the salary and benefits.
I can speak to it briefly, Ben. So a couple pieces. One, we hired a new utility engineer that's sewer focused during the last biennium. So that's a lot of the big uptick that you see there in the salaries and benefits is an additional FTE associated with it. And that coincides with the just huge amount of capital work that we have on the table to get done on the sewer side of the house as well. Regarding how the crew's time is split and charged.
Can I just interrupt you for a second, Jason? Because the bullet says it contains no new positions in 2024 compared to 2023. So that was a new position in 2023 compared to 2022?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, the hire would have occurred in early 2023, I believe.
Okay, thanks.
And then
go ahead about the allocation.
Okay, and then the allocation. So our utility crew is, when we hire utility members into our team, we do cross train them, right? So as you saw last night, we have a big emergency and we need our team members to be able to work both within the water and the sewer utility. However, their primary discipline that they work in is how they are charged and their time is allocated accordingly, right? So if I'm a utility crew member and I'm working on the sewer system, I'm charging my time to the sewer utility. If I'm working on the water utility, I'm charging it to the water utility. They are able to cross over between the two utilities, but their time is charged to the utility they're working on. So it coincides with the number of FTEs that are working the sewer side, coincides with that salary number that you see there. So we have 13 utility members, and I want to say it's pretty well split down the middle, 6 and 6 plus 1. I'll call them a specialist, but essentially 6 FTEs, if I recall correctly, Ben. You have the number off the top of your head, are sewer dedicated.
Great, thank you.
I can add some additional context to that actual for 2022. We did have some staff vacancies throughout 2022, which resulted in some salary and benefit savings on the year overall, as part of kind of our year-end analysis that happened at the beginning of this year. So that is a part of the jump. We have since filled all vacancies, done a good job or we've been very fortunate to do that this year. So that's why you see that 2023 be the fully realized budgeted cost of those or expended budgeted expenditure positions. When 2022, we saw some salary savings.
So the 1366 under 2022 actual is, even though it's an increase from the prior year, is actually less than you had anticipated?
It was less than originally budgeted, yeah.
Okay.
Other questions? Other questions or comments about the sewer rate discussion? Hearing none, I'll
Sorry,
go ahead, Steve.
just to say that this one was, I mean, obviously it's both presentations are quite complete in the amount of information in them. So it's, it was a useful read through it. So.
Any other comments or discussion? If not, I'll take a motion.
Yeah, I just wanted to agree. I think it was the background information was good, and I appreciate it.
All right, someone want to make a motion?
Yeah, that's fine. I'll move to accept staff's recommendation to increase the utility rate for 2024 to the 4.5%.
For sure.
And I'll second it.
All right, moved and seconded. Discussion. Discussion. Hearing none, call for a vote. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Again, passes unanimously. And for the record, the chair shares the appreciation for all the data.
Looks like Jason's question.
If I may, Chair O'Connell, I just want to, Elaine was working frantically in the background, pointing together data to Mr. Milton's question regarding our AC breaks. So this is, again, we haven't broken down by year, but here's some context for you regarding our water main breaks. So between 2010 and 2019, we had 84 breaks total over that time frame, 3 of which were AC pipe. From 2020 to current, we've had 38 breaks. 11 of those 38 are AC pipe. So a significant uptick in AC breaks.
Gotcha. Right.
It is. Remind us, Jason, when all of those AC pipes were installed in a period of years, late 50s, early 60s?
You got it. Perfect. Right. Late 50s, early 60s. And you'll recall that we do have in our 6-year program, our new item is to get all of that AC pipe that we know out of our system. And so there's a reason for it. So thank you for letting me share that data.
And can store it at City Hall.
And so just on those numbers, just doing the quick math, I don't know, you're talking, it's an increase kind of on an averaged annualized basis, as well as a much larger increase in the percentage of AC pipe. So.
Correct.
Got it.
All right, unless there's anything else on that, the next item on our agenda is, again, utilize discretion to reorganize the agenda, but we are going to return to item number 2 on the agenda for the AMI data collection outreach. So who is taking the lead to talk to us about?
Good evening, Utility Board. Elaine Summergan, Deputy Public Works Director on the operating side of the house, and I'm going to be taking this item this evening. I'm going to share my screen. With me. And hopefully you all can see that. Is that right?
Yes.
All right. You're seeing the correct screen, I take it.
Yes.
All right. So tonight I just want to talk about some outreach materials that the city's producing right now in tandem with our consultant on the AMI project, and that's HDR. And I'm going to give just a brief background on how we got here first, just for everyone's knowledge and anyone who's watching. So as a background, right now the city is implementing an advanced metering infrastructure system. We refer to it as AMI. So that's putting in so-called smart meters for our water system. All of the meters will be replaced, as we just discussed, in 2024, sometime between spring and summer. This new system is going to not only be more accurate, but will also allow our customers to monitor their water use and receive any sorts of alerts that come out, especially leak detection alerts. And then in terms of how often this data is being transmitted to the city, it's approximately hourly. And so while we can't consider the data live, it is very close to that. People can actually keep an eye on things as they change. In order to support the new AMI system, we need to put up data collection equipment around the island. And so this is the type of equipment that's transmitting all of that data, pulling it from those meters and transmitting it to the city for use in their system. So for our utility billing, for all of our water tracking. We had a very robust propagation study conducted a few years ago that really looked at how well that data can be transmitted across the island using as few of these data collection equipment sites as possible. And the results of that propagation showed us that we needed a minimum of 7 locations on the island to collect all that data effectively, efficiently. We want to collect that data from as many of those 7,900 meters as possible so that we don't need to be doing one-off reads. These 7 locations that were identified, you can see here on the map, and this map was also included in your packet. There are several sites. There's several sites in parks. We have, most of them are located actually in rights of way around the island. I'm happy to answer questions about any particular ones as we get through this. The equipment that I'm talking about here is really made up of 2 primary components. There's the base station, which is a smaller box, approximately 2 by 2, that's mounted on a pole, not very far up, approximately 15 feet. And then we have the antenna, which is usually a large, skinny antenna ranging about 7 to 9 feet long. And these are mounted on the tops of poles or existing structures. And in general, these poles need to be quite tall in order for the antennas to be picking up the data from all of these locations. And those poles range from 70 to about 90 feet high. And so if you're putting a 9-foot antenna on top of a 90-foot pole, you're almost at 100 feet. So these are quite tall. As Jason just alluded to there, we have come up against a few maybe permitting hurdles, let's say. We have found out that we need to go through a more extensive permitting process specifically on this data collection equipment. And that's really being triggered by the height of those antennas. So because they are being mounted so high on those poles, it falls just outside of where the code allows them. And so we actually need to go, for each of them, we need to apply for a conditional use permit. And really, this is a very comprehensive permitting process. There's a lot involved in it, but really the process of it is to look at what kinds of impacts there could be caused by this type of equipment and what the public benefit is. So really looking at weighing those 2 things.
So Elaine, can I interrupt for just a second with a real specific
Absolutely.
question? Are you saying that you need to get 7 different conditional use permits for the 7 different poles?
Yes, we do.
And is it going to be one hearing for all 7, or?
So we will go to, we will take them all to the hearing examiner together. So I believe they need to be separate public hearings, but they will be lumped together. So, and that's really how we're going through this process. So with CPD, as we go through this permitting, we're really treating it as, I mean, each site has its own unique, attributes to it, but we're really looking at doing these all together because it just makes more sense from a staff and consulting efficiency point of view. So, but
Sure.
Yes, they are technically all separate.
I'm sure you already said,
Go for it.
is it, what's the body that's regulated? Is this FCC or is this local?
No,
Well-
this is the city. So this is actually the city code.
specifically city code. Okay,
Yes, it is specifically the city.
thank you.
So a really big part of the conditional use permit process is that even before we apply for these permits, so even before we put in our applications, we need to do a really robust public outreach process. And that means reaching out to any of the project neighbors. And so what we've considered the project neighbors are really any property that is within at least 300-foot radius of each site. So anyone who's really going to be around this, see the construction, and 300 feet is a minimum. In most cases, we've actually created those buffers, those radii from the adjoining properties. So we're actually looking at a much bigger radius on a lot of these poles because they're in the right of way. And we really want to reach as many people as possible in this process. In terms of the process, like I said, we have a public hearing for each permit, and ultimately this is decided by the city's hearing examiner. So this is not a decision that is made internally. So, like I said, we did run a report on how many properties, what the properties were, really figured out what all the addresses were that we needed to reach out to. It's just shy of 500 separate properties, again, with that 300-foot radius. At the minimum, what we're looking at for outreach materials are 3 pieces of information. So one would be a letter to each resident. One is an FAQ flyer, and one is a door hanger. And the at least the draft documents for each of these were included in your packet materials. All of these materials are really going to be pointing towards our Let's Talk project page. And this is a page that has been set up for a little while now. This was actually created when we sent out mailers to the entire island, to all of the water customers on the island, when we were just letting people know about the meter replacement. So we'll actually be tying the public information, both of those pieces of public information, back to that Let's Talk project page. So we're going to be doing some updates there, some really site-specific information about the equipment, about the poles, and the pole location. Why I'm here this evening is that I think that the staff would benefit from hearing any board feedback on these materials. So looking at these materials and finding out, is the information being presented clearly enough? Are there bits of information you think that we aren't capturing adequately? Things the community may find useful in terms of additional information, or other methods of outreach that you would like to see us pursue. And that's really why we're here this evening, is just to glean from your knowledge of the community and your own experience here to see if we can improve our outreach. And that's all I have.
Steve, I saw you raise your hand.
I have one really quick suggestion. If you just go back to the last, to that flyer again.
Easier said than done.
Yeah, fair enough. I closed it quickly.
Let me pull this back up.
This goes on that final question that referred to the, is a conditional use permit required? Just from as a resident or as a person who's built this kind of stuff before, that question may be less relevant to most people than why are you reaching out to me about this? It's the same answer, but the question in terms of the FAQ, people generally don't frequently ask, is a permit required, as much as, why are you telling me all this right now?
Okay. All right. Thank you. That is very true. Right.
Some others. Councilman Jacobson. You're muted. There you go.
I would suggest, and I may have missed it on the way through here, but that you have a direct email link to the Let's Talk page. One of the complaints that I hear from people is, well, I have to go to Let's Talk and then I have to wade through that. And about half the time I can't get to the right place. And so I think that if you direct people to precisely where they're gonna get whatever other messages you have, I think the outreach will be much more successful.
Yeah, that's a great suggestion, especially because currently, I think we will move it up on the Let's Talk, but currently this page it's kind of down at the bottom of Let's Talk under Public Works. So we'll be pushing it to the top. Your suggestion is a great one. Not only will we have the link associated specifically with this page, but we'll also have a QR code on here that people can just scan instead of having to type in a web address, because these things will be hard copies. I think it's a lot easier for people if they are familiar with the technology to just scan a QR code, gets you right to where you're going. Thank you.
Meredith.
Yeah, okay, I'm unmuted. So on the part where it says once constructed, what will the equipment look like? I have to tell you that as I read through this, I went back and forth between understanding that there was a 70 to 90 foot pole and then there was a 7 to 9 foot antenna. And in fact, at first I thought there was some typos. And now I understand that the antenna is going to be on top of the pole. I don't think it's clear in this paragraph that the antenna is going to be sitting on top of a pole. Although rereading it, I understand that it says that. I mean, it says the equipment's the base station and the antenna. And then it says most is going to be located on the poles.
Okay.
So for me, I missed that now. And so I think it'd be more useful to say something like an antennas ranging from 7 to 9 feet, which will be placed on top of existing poles at or existing or new. I mean, however the marketing people, want to say it. I just thought that was entirely unclear to me. And then a totally unrelated question, and I don't want to open Pandora's box, but is there any concern and therefore any possible response? Do people have any concerns about privacy issues? I mean, getting your meter read once a month is a lot different than having usage going in once an hour. And I don't know that I care about my water usage. I'm just wondering if anybody thinks anybody else might care about it.
So I know Jason jumped on here, so I want to let him talk about it, but I will say that the data is encrypted and that and this is a secure connection to the city. So this is really not open to be pulled by outside parties. Jason, I don't know what you want to add on here.
No, I think you summarized it well. I think the other piece is we know that this is going to cause, not everyone's going to be excited about this, right? There's going to be discontent among people. And so our team is preparing to answer those questions. And, we expect some, just generic questions that safe. Why are we doing it? I mean, just the simple questions. And then we expect some sort of oddball questions as well. And that just comes with the nature of the type of project it is. And our team is preparing a list of those responses and trying to get out ahead of those before they are generated. But I think in terms of the privacy piece, Elaine summarized it really, really well.
And would it be useful to have something simple on the FAQ that says, all data is encrypted or any data transferred will be encrypted, something that without, maybe that you didn't want to open that door, but it's a nice piece of information to have.
Yeah, I think if it's going to end up being a somewhat common question, it's worth putting on there, especially if it's a pretty straightforward answer. The other thing that I'll say, and we found this with the original outreach that was done around the AMI project, is that as soon as we started to hear a question more than once or twice, we just automatically added it to the FAQ, right? Because usually if one person has the question, multiple people have the question. So we really are using that to drive what we put on there. And if you go to the site right now, you'll see a pretty long list of FAQs just because we've gotten a really nice wide range of questions. So we are trying to be responsive when we get those. So I appreciate that. And I do think we'll consider adding a question about privacy.
Board Member Majewski, you're next.
Yeah, thank you. So I can't think of anything that is this tall anywhere in the island except for some of our trees. So this isn't what people are used to seeing. So it'd be useful to explain why these need to be 100 feet tall.
Okay,
That was actually going to be my comment, Steve. Is agreed, and I think you put your finger on. I think we should just be upfront because I don't see anywhere in here where it says it's a 7 to 9 foot antenna on top of a 70 to 90 foot pole. I think we should.
Yeah, it says located on existing utility poles. Taller poles may be installed, but it doesn't actually say on top of, those poles.
Yeah, I think a little more transparency would be useful there.
yep,
So-
absolutely.
So I think these will be the tallest structures on the island. And correct me if I'm wrong.
I don't know that that's true, but I think it's worth looking into also, right? If we can say, if we can compare it, right, to say similar structures are currently located, but you may be correct about the height. I'll need to look at it a little more closely.
Councilman Jacobson.
I think being straight up with the public is a much better way to do it. Because if you're not straight up with the public, then people say, aha. And then the rumors start. People get on next door, and then we have not only a public relations problem, but we have little verbal prairie fires that we got to go be fighting. I think we said that they'll be on top of poles, the 70, 90 foot poles, and be absolutely upfront about it. And if people don't like it, fine, but nobody's going to be backdoor and say, well, you never told us that, because that gets us in trouble more often than not, in my experience.
I agree with that. I would really like us to be as transparent as possible. I don't want anyone to be blindsided or surprised by this, which is really the purpose of this outreach effort, right? Is to let people know all of the details. I think what can be maybe a little bit tricky is that these 7 locations actually vary quite a bit. So some of them are on existing poles right now. For example, one of them will be an antenna on top of an existing light standard that is on our ball field at Island Crest Park right now, right? So this is not a new structure. There's already a light on the top of it. Most people won't even notice it, which is going to be really different than a new 90-foot pole going up in a neighborhood, right? So there's going to be a very wide range, but I think maybe it does us a disservice to focus on the one that exists than to focus on the new one that's going to have more of a visual impact. So like I said, we do want to point people to Let's Talk, where we can go into more detail about what's happening at this site and what's happening at this site, so that people can really understand which is the one in their neighborhood. Why are they being contacted specifically?
And I'll just reiterate that the reason we're here is to be transparent, right? We have to go in front of the hearing examiner. We want to make sure that we have reached out to the community and heard from members of the community in terms of what information is needed to make sure it's transparent and clear. And so that's why we're here tonight. So we certainly want to fall on that same request from Councilmember Jacobson, and that's what we're working to do.
Steve, then Stephen, then Meredith.
Okay, yeah. So
I took my hand down, so sorry if I left it up.
All right.
So the question I was just, would it be worth adding something to either this back or under the Let's Talk about kind of the alternative plan that was reviewed in terms of what if the propagation study, in order to make them all short enough, for instance, to fit within normal code, like so they just would fit on normal poles, how many more of these antennas would have been required and how much more expensive that would have been for the utilities and for the ratepayers. That might, so that people understood the trade-off that was being made. We decided to do fewer, and a few of them had to be kind of extra tall in order to not have so many and to be much less expensive for the city and for ratepayers.
That's a great thought. I will reach out to Ferguson, who did our propagation study, and see if they can pull that data for me.
Great. Very excellent question. Excellent comment, Steve. Meredith.
Yeah, no, I agree, Steve. I think that's really a good thing to put in, and it can be in the let's talk, but that's a good thing. So this is really more a question for Jason, and it's not so much about these outreach materials, but so in terms of the permitting, is there any concern on the city staff or the legal staff that like a permit might be denied? I mean, if we have neighbors who go up in arms about this, or I realize you can't predict the future, but
Yeah, I mean, there's always a possibility. It's in the back of our mind for sure, and that's why we're trying to go above and beyond what's expected of us. And there's there's not a playbook for us in how we do this, right? We have to put our best foot forward, and we get an opportunity to do it, and that's what we're trying to do here. But yeah, that's certainly a question that lingers in the back of our mind, and we'll have to go through that process, and hopefully we're hopeful that we can come out the other side and have a positive experience with it. And if we don't, then we'll come back to the board and talk about what does this mean? How does it impact us? What do we have to do? So I don't want to spend time on that yet until we know if that's the path we have to go down. We're confident that we're confident working with our team and the city team that we can go through this hearing examiner process and get the needed outcome to successfully install this system and our new meters and be off and running. But again, we got to do the necessary work now and reach out and be transparent with the process. And that's what we're trying to do here.
Any other comments or questions?
I guess just as a comment, I mean, it looks like again, it's a good start for these materials. I know you guys have put a lot of work into them, so it's always tricky trying to come up with frequently asked questions before anyone's asking questions. So yeah.
Frequently anticipated questions.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, we appreciate all of the feedback that you've given us here tonight. I think there were some really great points and certainly ones that we'll integrate into the revision. So thank you so much. And I will certainly keep you all apprised of any developments as we go through this process, but also the fully developed outreach materials that we end up with. So thank you.
Thank you, Elaine. Very good discussion. All right. Next item of business is a review of the work plan, at least as of the moment, unless I hear anything to the contrary from Jason. We do not have a meeting scheduled for November.
Correct.
Yes, but we do have a meeting scheduled for our normal date in mid-December, the 12th. Recology report is on that agenda item. Is there anything in addition to that?
Not at this time. Perhaps maybe something else will be added, but not at this time. Stay tuned.
Yeah, well, but the recology discussion will be do you anticipate, Jason, being any further along in the process of the necessary revision to the recology contract in light of the county's rate changes?
Yeah, actually, so the proposed contract amendment will go to the council on the 17th. We just got the updated numbers yesterday, and so we have the agenda bill drafted, and so we will be actually go ahead.
17th of
October, so next week.
Next week.
And the reason you may recall, the reason that we have to put it on the council agenda for the 17th is a timing for the rate notification requirements per the contract. We have to notify the utility ahead of time, a certain number of days ahead of the actual change in the rates. And so in order to meet that notification requirement, it's got to go to the council next week. So, but we can certainly talk about that. We have the numbers and we can certainly ask questions. There are some definite questions that this board likes to ask and are good questions for ecology along the way.
Any other item of business that should come before the board?
Tim, could I just
go ahead.
Who was speaking?
Elena, you go
Elaine? Was that
first.
you? Elaine, go ahead.
All right, I apologize. I got a reminder from our city clerk today that she sent out an invitation to all of you for a training that's happening in the afternoon, early evening on October 18th. And this is for parliamentary procedure training. This is put on by Jurassic Parliament. I believe a couple of you have been through it before. It is not a required training, but she did say it is a very strongly encouraged training. It is entertaining, and it's really informative, and we highly suggest that all of you who can attend do attend.
I did that a good few months ago. It was offered, and entertaining is the right word. If your kids went through the stage of life where they were fascinated by dinosaurs, it would bring back all kinds of memories. So that's the kind of the extended metaphor training.
That basically scheduled like kind of once a year that they offer that again, or because it doesn't seem like it was that long ago, but
It was not that long ago. It was earlier in the year, in the spring sometime, is my recollection.
I think she tries to have it offered a couple times a year just to capture as many of the boards and commissions as possible. And so she's trying to get them on the calendar a little more often in the hopes that she can get everyone on board.
Great. Thank you for the reminder.
Thank you.
Meredith.
Yeah, one, I was going to say, I also went through it a few months ago, Tim, in the spring, and was surprised at how good it was. And actually, I went back to the city clerk and said it was really quite useful. So for anybody who's a board member who hasn't taken it yet, really, it will not be wasted time. And then I was just going to ask Jason, and I can wait till Jake says whatever he says, and maybe there's no more to be said if there's a kind of 2-minute update on the water main break that just happened in the last 24 hours.
Certainly. I don't know, Jake, I don't know if you want me to go now, or do you want to
Go
talk
ahead.
first? Okay, sure. So we, as you are aware, we had a water main break near the 4600 block of West Mercer Way last evening around 9 o'clock. It's a 14-inch cast iron pipe that was installed 1958, so quite old. Crews responded to the island and were able to isolate the water main break and start following our main break procedures. A pipe of that size is one, it doesn't break on the island. We don't have very much of that infrastructure in our system, and when it does happen, it's hard to source those materials. So this morning at about 2 a.m. we got down to the pipe and realized that it's not a simple band repair, which is pretty common for our types of main breaks that we have within the cast iron pipe system. This was actually a pretty significant break where there was about a 12-foot section of pipe that was cracked on the bottom side of it. And so instead of putting a band on the pipe and fixing the repair, we actually have to over excavate, cut both ends of the pipe, and then bring new pipe in and do a full pipe replacement. About an 18-foot section of pipe was installed. So sourcing those materials is not easy. Our crew reached out to some folks early this morning, and actually we were sourced the materials from one of the other utilities in the region, and they actually brought the materials to us this morning. And then our crew was on site all afternoon, cutting the pipe and fitting it, and got the pipe in the ground and water flowing to the site. And I just heard, as we're sitting on this call this evening, that the water has been restored. They've been opening up meters to individual residences, and the 36 homes that have been impacted for the last 24 hours or so, they now have water flowing back to their house, which is a great thing. There's a caveat to it. With a main break of this size and magnitude, we often have to issue a precautionary boil water advisory, which is no different here. And so the reason for that is that water has to be tested to make sure it's safe for consumption. And so that those samples get pulled and sent to a lab, and there's a mandatory waiting time, obviously, with the samples in a petri dish and things like that. So once we get that satisfactory result back from the lab, we'll notify those folks. But in the meantime, at least they have water to take showers and flush toilets and things like that. So more to come, but obviously a pretty big event. It took all hands on deck, a lot of hours last night and today, and the crew's tired. So the fact that they're getting meters turned back on is fantastic, and they can go home and get some well-deserved rest. So hopefully that's a quick enough update in a nutshell. And if you have additional questions, I'm happy to talk about it further, but that's what's going on now.
Councilmember Jacobson.
Yes, because municipal elections are held for many cities and towns and all in the odd years, such as this fall, that parliamentary procedure, Robert's Rules thing is normally given in January or February to capture all the new people that may be elected and or boards and commissions, since we're entering into a new 2-year kind of well, not a new 2-year thing, but a new year. So that'll be that. And then the other thing I'd just say on behalf of my colleagues in the city council, we really appreciate the work that the city does to bring these matters before you and the consideration that y'all give them. This is when things get to us from this board, we generally believe that they've been given the once, twice, and third time over, and we can proceed generally in accordance with your recommendations. All bets are off for November 17th or whenever it is, because I can only speak for myself, but thank you.
Of course. I will come prepared.
We'll treat you gently.
Thank you. Thank you, Jake. All right. Anything else for the good of the order? If not, our next meeting is December 12th. I believe it's a 5 o'clock start again. I'll take a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
I move to adjourn.
I heard Meredith first,
Oh,
and Dave, and then I'll treat you as a second. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Right. Thanks, everybody. See you in December.
All right, thanks, everyone. Thanks, Jason.
Bye now.